We have seen the harms of regulatory capture. We know the kind of money that's at stake in the pharmaceutical industry. We know the kind of collusion between pharmaceutical companies and government. And so that doesn't mean, I mean, I always like try to be careful when I'm thinking or speaking, not to assume that wherever there's a conflict of interest, the decision will always be made in favor of the wrong interest, right? I don't want to make that suggestion, because you could have a very benevolent billionaire, right, who always makes who really does genuinely care for humanity. But whenever there's a conflict of interest like that, and we're talking about tens of billions of dollars in stock that are now being dumped by these CEOs, but whenever you're talking about that kind of money, it's incumbent upon us as the average citizen, as the average drug taker, as the average vaccine recipient, to be skeptical and to ask questions. Is this necessary? Am I really in a state where I'm facing a viral threat that has a high infection fatality rate for my age group? Am I? And then on the other side, what kind of trials have we seen? How's that data looking? We had the data from Pfizer released, and well, gee, it's not looking so good. And I was just reading this morning about a German insurance company that, they're saying that I think 10 million people, 10 million vaccine recipients, there's data on them now. And it's I think the word from the CEO was it's shocking and requires further investigation. So it's not surprising to me that this regulatory capture can happen. What's surprising and concerning and needs to be addressed moving forward, I think, is that the average person has the critical thinking skills to ask these questions and be more reflective. And that physicians, right, should be responsible for administering these, or not conveniently, right? This practice of vaccinating for COVID has been taken out of the, I think, fiduciary relationship between physician and patient and put in, I mean, in our case, you can go to like your local sports arena and get it from who knows who, right? We need to be more critical. We need to I was talking to Jordan Peterson a while. He had this beautiful metaphor about his tool shed. He was saying that thinking and critical thinking is like you've got all these tools in the shed and you need exactly the right tool for the specific job. And you need to keep them rust free and sharp and ready to go and know where they are. But thinking is like that, and this has been this COVID test, which is not a biological test. By that, I mean, it's a test of our ability to think through a massive onslaught of information coming at us from a perceived set of authorities. And I think we've failed miserably. It doesn't mean that failure needs to become, it's not inevitable that we will always fail, but we need, moving forward, to look back historically and figure out how we got ourselves to this place and how we can do better. We were talking earlier about the past and about historical events, like what happened in Europe in the 30s and 40s, and why we're so reluctant to make analogies to that point in time. But it seems to me that if we close off the possibility of looking at the past as a possible way of informing how we move forward, we are disabling ourselves beyond measure.
Yeah, so I've been focused on pharma and regulatory capture for many years because of a project I did in graduate school that revealed a flaw in the drug safety system, which, as far as I know, is still not corrected. It's a flaw that makes things look less toxic than they actually are. But most people, although until a couple of years ago, would have had some sense of, yes, pharma corruption is a real thing, during COVID, completely suspended their disbelief.
Amnesia.
Yeah. And I have the sense that we walked into the largest version of a game that pharma plays every day of every week throughout the year, right? Pharma is constantly in the process of trying to define a need for which they have a pharmacological solution, trying to expand the definition of that need so it covers the maximum number of people, trying to convince doctors that the solution that they have is in fact the best one and it is should be the standard of care, trying to persuade government that the solution is safe enough to be worth the costs. And that what happened is that COVID opened up the largest new market sector conceivable. And that this game has been played out where, I don't know, I'm sure you had the same experience I did, where somehow pharma was speaking even through my friends, right? Pharma was telling me that I was being irresponsible to discuss what I was perfectly well qualified to see. As a scientist who trained to understand complex systems, as somebody who has studied immunobiology, I was perfectly capable at looking at these vaccines and saying, well, wait a minute. There are all kinds of ways this could go wrong. They haven't been around long enough for us to know in which of these ways they will go wrong. And I'm being mandated to take it over what kind of risk, right? Those are all...
And mandated not to talk about it because we live in this era of this credentialism, this expertism. And by the way, what we mean by an expert is only these particular people. We've sort of deemed these people appropriate mouthpieces or appropriate, I wouldn't even say sort of subjects for debate, because we don't even see debate happening between, amongst themselves. We're just seeing only these people who are considered to be experts are allowed to speak of these things. And you're not an expert if you disagree, not if you don't have the appropriate credentials or background or education. But what makes you a non-expert is your disagreement with the ideology of the system.
That's exactly right. And it is the most upsetting thing for anybody who's studied logic in any way. The idea that it is your very disagreement with the consensus that renders you unqualified, when the point is, well, then what is the nature of this consensus? Right? If there are those of us who ordinarily would be considered qualified, and if we were in agreement, you'd say we were qualified, but as soon as we disagree, we are not qualified, then that consensus isn't anything. It's coercion itself.